Hello, hello. Good morning. Welcome to New Music Gathering Day 2. I'll do my Ira Glass impersonation. New Music Gathering Day 2 of New Music Gathering. Morning panel on money. Woo! We have Stephanie Ann Boyd. We have Ron Silver. We have Adam Schumacher. All of them music makers and thinkers and creators, and also music money gatherers and thinkers abouters of thereof money. Yes. So they're going to talk to you about that. There'll be three separate presentations. After each one, we'll make room for maybe 2 or 3 quick questions, and maybe no comments. I'm just going to say it. Questions? Yes, no comments. And without further ado, I'm going to present Adam Schumacher.
Thank you, Gasha. Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful morning outside. I think this is the first time I've ever presented outside. It's really nice. So I'll make this, I'm going to burn through my presentation as quickly as I can. It's a lot of info, a lot of thoughts. The money we make is something I've been kind of playing with for the past 3 or 4 years. It's a conversation, an honest conversation about how musicians, how creators, composers, performers make money, and really not just how they make it, but how much are they making. So many conversations go into how to be entrepreneurial, how to do all these tactics so you can survive and live, but nobody says how much is that? How much is that costing, or how much is that bringing in? And what other factors come into play with the actual dollar amount? So the idea that, we don't talk about it. People are like, oh, well, it's not polite to ask somebody's income. We even have corporations going, you're not allowed to ask each other your incomes or your salaries or your hourly rates, even though that's illegal, right? Just so you know, it's illegal to dissuade people from conversing about their incomes if you're an employer. And so this perception of like, well, I can't talk about my income because it's not polite has been proliferated for who knows how long. I thought about like doing some research, but I'm not really kind of the research kind of guy, even though this is kind of a research project. So, but you all feel it, right? If someone just said, how much do you make yearly? You might be like, it's kind of a weird question, right? So there's definitely a perception, there's a taboo. I'm glad I brought my sunglasses, about talking about our money and how much we make. And so the idea of this project was to get people talking about it freely, educationally, so we can learn from each other, so we can advocate for more income, yada, yada. I think I have that on a slide somewhere. Other wages, other industries have wages. Like they have things you can search, and yeah, they have wages. Yeah, I know, it's funny when I say it that way. But there's base salaries you can search out, and some corporations actually post those base salaries, right? If you're working for a public university, you can look up university salaries, even though it doesn't tell you who's making that. Kind of gives you a general gist. There's GuideStar, if you've ever done that for nonprofits. You can look up the Form 990s and see what the highest paid people make. But the rest of it's kind of buried. I thought it was interesting because I was like, what do people make, Michigan, if I were to do basic searches? And some of these websites are more reputable with what they produce out, but they give you kind of base salaries and ranges of what general professions make, how much they make a year in the areas that you're looking. And so music, you can actually look up music, and some websites will be like, a musician makes this much. But we all know that's like impossible to tell for various reasons, which we'll get into. So the money I make, this is a funny project too, because I've spent years asking people how much they make and how they make it, and I have yet to have anybody ask me how much money I make. And so I dare you. Questions after, Lainey? You have to remember this too. But I'll say real quick, my journey through finances has been graduating in 2008 with my master's, not knowing what the heck I'm doing other than I liked nonprofit work. I pulled together like 3 to 5 jobs my first year. I make about $20,000 from 2008 to 2009. It's enough to get by in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo has a low cost of living. It's pretty nice. But as I'm moving forward, I'm trying to find jobs and all these part-time jobs and cobbling them together. As I progressed through my career and I finally got my first full-time job in 2011, the tail end of 2011, that first salary was, I think it was $35,000. But it was still like, oh, there's more work to do here. I still kept a teaching position, had a full-time 30-hour full-time position, right? And still freelance. I think I had a couple other jobs still. I probably still had about 4 jobs when I had my first full-time job. I've stayed with that organization for 10 years. And I've slowly, as I've convinced my previous boss and other bosses to maybe give me a raise, I've slowly cut things out of my activity. I was trying to find a fourth interviewer that was kind of like next level in terms of perceived success. I say perceived because who really knows, right, financially? But I wanted to find somebody that I knew was bringing in some big awards or bigger commissions. I must have asked like 20 or 30 people, and I couldn't get a single person to reveal their income, which brings me to perceptions again. I have this idea that, you know, there's a sweet spot of like, I'm still middle class, apparently. I'm not making tons of money, but I'm comfortably living, and so I'm happy to share my income with my peers. If I go below that, I might be like, I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm still struggling, right? If I go above that threshold, whatever that is, and this is a guess, right? This is a guess. But if I go above that threshold, I might be perceived as too successful, maybe even rich, even though nobody can really see all the expenses that it takes to achieve that income level. But I was like, there's got to be a thing there that people on the successful side are also uncomfortable talking about what they make and how they make. It's no judgment to them. It's just a thing, right? It's just how we behave as humans. So that's where we started with all this. So I put together a survey. And the survey basically asked people, how much are you making with each of these jobs? A little bit of demographics, a little bit of location stuff, just to kind of framework it. It's not a scientific study. I'm not trying to prove anything statistically. I'm trying to create a general story for us to digest and learn from. And I had, let's see, I'll just pop over here. I've already talked about some of these reasons here, but I was really trying to, again, profile how people are putting together their living wages, whether we believe they're living or not. It's a whole other discussion, but how they're putting together their wages and how they're making it work for them, so that we can learn as a community, so that we can learn as teachers who teach younger generations who are up and coming into the arts industry what to expect and what's normal, what's being practiced right now, and what we're all doing to make it work. The other thing I have to add in point 4 there, advocacy. Without knowing the actual numbers and what people are making, it's really hard to advocate for more, or to advocate for yourself, or to advocate for others. And for me as an administrator that hires people, also as a freelancer that demands wages, right? I ask people for money. I understand both sides of the situation. I need to know from both sides of my jobs what people are making so I can find that sweet spot to where it's affordable for whoever's buying that service or paying that person, and also livable for that person that I'm trying to get, right? So it goes both ways, that advocacy. So here's the findings. I'm going to try and go through these. Lainey, just tell me if I'm going over. So Am I going fast? Oh, good. Good. Yes. Whew. All right. I was all worried because, lots of slides, lots of time. So I had 30 respondents, which was awesome. Like, I know it doesn't seem like much sometimes, but 30 people to tell you how much they're making and when and where, super cool. Trying to keep it confidential, and I say trying, I am keeping it confidential. It's no joke there. It's a good spread, and I thought it was, we're a highly educated group. 97% of respondents have a degree, and the 73 of those have a second degree. 40% have a third degree, right? We're a smart group of people. Together, and so the survey kind of broke down wages per job. So I had all those jobs totaled and took the average salary of what people are making. This is just a random chart that pulled from the data, but of people's data points. But the average income base, if we take it all in, it was $58,915. So looking at some recent U.S. stats, just to kind of see, am I doing okay? How am I doing against U.S., right? The average house, the median household income, right? The middle, not the bottom, not the top, but the middle. The median was $61,526. And then I thought, well, that's household income, right? Households are a variety of people. Sometimes we have partners, sometimes we have singles and individuals. 53% of households from 2019 were dual income. And so median household income, dual income, you can kind of think about that, about how that pans out to the average income that's been reported on the survey of $58,000 for an individual. The point is, we're not doing bad. It's work in a variety of creative and interesting ways, and I think that's to be commended. It's a good. Y'all are smart. You can do some math and make people pay you. It's good. So demographics, because it's important to think, what is happening. Thank you. And who am I talking about? This is a predominantly, males responded to the survey. That's the red there. You probably might not be able to see that, but, and that's not surprising, especially for a volunteer survey. So we have the red is identified as male, yellow is female. I have non-conforming and transgender non-binary, the green and the blue. So just a little slice of the pool of people who volunteered. Socioeconomic upbringing came into play just to consider, I was like, well, who are the music makers that are making money? I know it says 31 respondents. I had to scratch one, so some of the data is a little off. But, generally people identified in the middle class is the yellow. The green is upper middle class, and the red is lower middle class. And then you have upper class is the pink. And there's a couple other slices in there, but it's hard to see in the sun. So employment, and this is where it gets a little interesting, right? I asked people if they are only paid as an employee, so are they working for an organization paid on W-2s? Are they only freelance, or do they have both? The yellow is both. So 74% of respondents are mixing income types. They're not just freelance, they have freelance work, but they also have regular, this is either full-time or part-time paid work as an employee. Employee status, the yellow is full-time jobs. So out of the respondents, we had about 58% had a full-time job in addition to the other work they got into. So kind of interesting. And you have part-time as the red and temporary seasonal, if you care to recognize that. You should, but some people don't even realize that their job is temporary seasonal sometimes, unless they're doing the hiring. That's the blue. Talking about hours per week, we kind of hit the 30 and the 40 for the most common hours per week for, again, those employee-based jobs, the W-2 jobs. Some people were working more. But I thought it was interesting that a lot of people were working 30, so it's kind of like that, that borderline is kind of full-time, but it has room for everything else according to those hours, which we know are estimates. We also asked self-employment income. So there was room for multiple employee incomes, and there was also room for multiple self-employment incomes. Out of the first self-employment income, most people were doing business as themselves. That's the DBA, that's the blue. And so it's interesting to see how people are organizing themselves and kind of refreshing to go that most of us are not necessarily building an S corp or even an LLC. They're just doing business as their own name as a freelancer. Working hours, again, looking through working hours. I just put some of this up there to show where people were commenting on their self-employment. It's a nice smattering. I'm happy to share with you the link to this slideshow if you ever wanted to, so you can feel free to email me. And then I thought this was interesting too, going into self-employment too, only about a quarter of the people kind of thought about a secondary self-employment gig. And I'll say that some of this is kind of skewed because when I think about self-employment, I put in composing, arranging, sound work, anything that's like on my Schedule C that's not my W-2 work kind of goes into one box. Some people are separating things out. I noticed that some people had composing and arranging separated from their teaching studio, which was an LLC. So a lot of this is based on people's stories of how they're expressing their incomes. Lifestyle was also a really important factor, right? And this is something that I really want to stress with these numbers, is that 58,000 is the average, but doesn't mean that 58,000 is the same if you live in Boston versus New York versus Kalamazoo. Insanely different, right? I did the math once, and I would have to make double of what I make in Kalamazoo to live the same way I want to live in Boston, right? It's about double in terms of the actual numbers. So lifestyle to me was really important, important point to bring home. The lifestyle location, most of us, 58% are urban, red is suburban, yellow is rural. So we had a nice mix, but the urban setting seems to be where a lot of the music making is happening. Rent to own, considering what people are doing, 54% own, 45% rent. Kind of down the middle there. Transportation came up, and I'm going to kind of burn through a little bit of these to think about how people are living. And then I thought this was an interesting one too. Relationships. They impact our household income, our ability to earn and whatnot, and how we choose to earn. Right? Some people choose to have a breadwinner. Some people do equal share. It's a nice mix. Hopefully, a good partnership. 31 out of the 30 respondents, we have about 77% have a partner or are married, long-term partner or married. Kids also impact that lifestyle. I know. This is kind of, I wouldn't say surprising, but interesting. Out of the 30 respondents, for 0 kids, we had 73%. I have no judgments of that. I have 3 kids. I've met some other people with kids here. I know some people don't have kids, but it's an interesting data point to look at in these 30 respondents, right? And how we make and live in the music industry. And then traveling came into play too. Thank you. So with this travel, with work, sometimes as a touring musician, we have to travel. New Music Gathering has to travel to put this stuff on. Me in Kalamazoo, I necessarily don't have to travel most of the time with my admin position. And so this is an interesting point to consider with the income that we make and how we utilize it. So there's a good swath of our group here. The green is about 4 or more times a year for traveling. I thought that was kind of interesting. Then debt is the final thing to consider, right? So, your ability to earn, your ability to feel good about your lifestyle and what you can do with your money is greatly impacted by your debt. Student debt is one of the most, I guess, kind of non-standard, and I say standard debt is like the mortgage or rent, right? If you're trying to buy a house, that's kind of assumed to be part of our living. It's a whole other discussion with, housing and whatnot. But student loans, medical, and credit cards seem to be the debt that's kind of eating away at our ability to live comfortably. And so just a quick little run through it, but 45% had student loans. I actually had them break them out. And again, this might be a little hard to see from there. Happy to share these slides with anybody who wants them. But we had a good chunk. The 25% in the light blue is actually less than 100,000, so in that 90 to 100,000 range. Which is a very significant chunk of student loans for a quarter of the respondents. And so that's something to consider when we're looking at our education paths and how people are managing to work with the money they have. If you have that kind of debt you're paying off, again, that average salary, 58,000, might not go as far. Actually, it won't go as far. So debt's really important, and student loans came in. And I just asked credit card debt, not how much, but just seeing where people are at. And so the final thoughts for this, the last point I want to bring home is that that red chunk, out of all the people that reported incomes and split them across my survey, they had two. The red chunk is 2 jobs at least, right? That's the majority of all respondents. The yellow is 3 or more jobs. And I think the light green is 4 and the blue is 1. So there's a high level of combining income in our industry that needs to be talked about. We need to know what people are making, how they're making it work, because if you have one salary at one place, it doesn't mean that's your only thing that's making it happen for you. And that's the norm. That is expected. That's what we're all doing to live and to live the lifestyle that we want to live. And I don't think any of us are super rich, so I'm just putting that out there. That's my presentation for the day. I'll do questions afterwards. You can also take the survey if you feel like contributing those numbers. I'm hoping to write a little more about this and think about this data and put together more thoughts in the near future. It's an ongoing survey, so feel free. And there's my email, my website, which needs updated, my Twitter, and my Facebook. So thank you very much. Yeah, Laney's asking, did most of the responses come from NMG? I would say not most, actually. A good tail end hit. I'd say probably about the last quarter of responses came from the push, which is great. So thank you. But yeah, it was kind of been ongoing. My next step is to kind of think about it more and consider just. I really like to write articles, so I want to get back to that. It's been a little while. I think I stopped. What about health insurance? Yeah, so that was a question. I had a whole question about benefits. I didn't go into it today because of time, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to say about it. But yeah, there's definitely data on that, and that's why I want to write more about it, more long form. Yeah, because that's part of the question. What kind of benefits are being provided in the jobs that are being reported, from health insurance to 401k to, to even like going to conferences, like kind of professional support. So. Yeah, so the idea is that, yeah, it's pre-tax. It's kind of like what you would just say you make as a paycheck, right? So we're not, I mean, part of this is not trying to get so like required with the details that people are like, I don't know. And so I just said, what do you make at this job? And kind of, looking at your tax returns, your portable income. I know there's a lot more details that go into that. I love taxes. I actually do talks about that. But kind of, I do. It's a thing I do. I do. I give talks about taxes. Is that bad? But yeah, it's basically what you perceive as that income base. So it's not 100% perfect, but yeah, it's a good question.
We're not going to worry about shade. So, hi everybody. My name is Ron Silver. I am. Thank you. I'm the producer of New Music, New College at New College of Florida, which is in Sarasota, Florida. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I'm the producer of New Music, New College at New College of Florida. New College of Florida is a tiny public liberal arts college. New Music, New College is an outgrowth of our music program that's been around now for about 24 years. It started organically, and part of what we do is we present concerts of experimental, contemporary, avant-garde music. We work with our students, and we also bring in external professional visiting artists for some of our concerts. It's a wonderful program, newmusicnewcollege.org. Look us up. And it costs money. So I'm here to talk about getting some local grants. Now, the reason I say local is there are, of course, national grants. I have been moderately successful at getting local grants. I have been completely unsuccessful at getting national grants, so I'm going to talk about what I can do. Now, I represent an organization. There are some grants for individuals. Sometimes if you're a performing group, you might want to consider becoming a not-for-profit organization. Just check out these details, but I'm going to talk in general about grants. They're going to vary from location to location, but probably every state and many, many counties and even cities, if they're large enough, offer arts grants of some kind. Pardon me. Stubble pulling my mask down. And there are also local foundations. So what are grants? Grants are when people give you money to do things, which sounds terrific, but there are always some strings attached. So generally, a grant is given to support a particular project. So you'll need to have those details in mind before applying. This often means you'll be thinking more than a year ahead. Now, that's actually a helpful thing if you're not already doing so. Now, it doesn't mean that you will then be locked into doing exactly what you say when you submit your application. People realize that circumstances change. For instance, we had this thing called COVID. But in case you haven't heard, even without major disasters like COVID, grant organizations understand that what I submitted 2 years ago may not be exactly what we're doing as we start our season now. So don't worry about being locked into something, but it's really good to be in the ballpark. If you do get a grant approved, you will probably have to do some revisions at the beginning of the grant period, especially the original budget that you submitted. And speaking of grant periods, grants are often given for a specific period of time only. If they are, all grant funds have to be spent during that time, not before and after, and all activities related to that grant have to be done in that time. This may or may not coincide with your project or your season, so you have to be prepared to adjust things appropriately. Sometimes that means finding other sources for funding things outside the grant period. I have this issue. One of the 2 grants that we apply for every year is from our county. Our county's fiscal year starts and ends on October 1. Our fiscal year, the college's fiscal year, starts July 1st. And our season begins usually September, sometimes October, but our expenses begin before that. Like we do a printed brochure that gets mailed out in July, August this year. That costs money that I would love to pay for by that county grant. And in this case, I find a different funder to pay for the mailing, and then we work with the printer and say, will you invoice us on October 1 or afterwards? And they say, okay, because they know us, and we pay for it in that grant. Now, if you begin getting grants, you'll find yourself thinking about several years simultaneously. So you'll be thinking 1 or 2 years ahead as you write a grant for a future project. You'll be thinking about the immediate year ahead as the grant is awarded to you, and you prepare to do not only that great stuff you do, but also the administration and the data collection that's required for the grant, and I'll talk about data in a little bit. You look back at the previous season when you're writing up your final report. Most grants have a final report that you have to write up. And then you sometimes look back at several seasons to come up with your budget, which you need to apply for a new grant when you're thinking 2 years ahead again. So you get used to thinking about all these time periods at the same time. Most are what are called matching grants, and that means that if you get a grant for a certain amount of money, you'll need to raise that money, at least that amount of money, from other sources. It could be ticket sales, donations, or other grants. And there's also a thing called in-kind. Some grants allow in-kind matching. In-kind, in general, means it's not cash, but it's something of value. So it could be people who volunteer their time. It could be an organization saying, you can use our space for your performance. You have to quantify that. Those are all details that you'll find when you apply. Grant applications are usually judged by panels, and they're often made up of volunteers, and they're often from the world of the arts or the community, and they'll score your application, and they'll make a recommendation to fund or not to fund. We hope to fund. The people on these panels are your allies, not your adversaries. So what you want to do is to make the application one they want to fund. So I'm going to give what I think of as some tips while I turn my page. Old school. So my first tip is follow the prompts. Now, by prompts, I mean when you're doing a grant application, and most at this point are online, there will be a whole series of questions that you will respond to, or statements you'll respond to. Read them carefully, respond to what they say, not to what you think they should say, or what you want to talk about, which might not be what the prompt says. Respond to the prompts. And I'm not kidding about this. It's easier said than done. Answer questions clearly and succinctly. Don't add extraneous detail. Understand that panelists, and I said, they're often volunteers. They read a ton of applications. You want to make their job as easy as possible. You want them to say, this was a great application. It answered the questions. It followed the prompts. Didn't make me spend all this time reading about how they're great because marmosets like their music, and, you know, isn't that a wonderful thing? If it's not a grant about marmoset music. Think about audience, and by that I don't mean, the people who come to your wonderful performances. I mean the people who are reading your grant applications. Remember, they're not you. They may not know your program. They may not know anything about new music, even if they're reading grants about music. They may not know any music after Brahms. I run into this a lot. So just think outside yourself. Explain it to someone who doesn't know what you're doing. And it's really helpful to get a second reader to look at your application. Even better, one who's not in your organization. Show them the prompts, show them your responses. You don't have to do it all at once. Show, hey, what do you think about this response? See what that person says. If you can't, and even if you can, reread it with a second set of eyes. By that, I mean, I do this over and over. I'll write a response, I'll put it aside, I'll work on a completely different part of the grant, and 2 or 3 days later, I'll come back to what I wrote. I'll reread that prompt, and then I'll read what I answered, and I'll say, did I address it? Did I address everything that they were saying and asking? Did I add stuff that doesn't matter? I'll do that over and over again, and I'll keep iterating until I think it's pretty good. Don't kill yourself. The perfect is the enemy of the good, by the way. You want to submit the grant on time. If there is a print preview function, you don't necessarily have to print. It just shows it up as a PDF. Use it. I use that over and over and over and over again because it shows you what the application will look like to the panelists. So you can see things like, oh, I got typos here, or the formatting didn't come out like I expected. The spacing makes it hard to read. It's just a very useful thing. If there is an opportunity to look at previous season's successful grants, do it. Use them. Copy them. I've done that. I've looked at successful, high-scoring grants from similar organizations from previous seasons and said, wow, I see how they did their goals and actions, and that's really cool. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And sure enough, my score went up to the point where one time for our state of Florida grant, our application was the model, the highest score that they used, which is great for my ego, but does not help me improve my grant for the next year. And that leads me to another important point. The granting authority wants you to get this grant. If it's a local grant, if it's a state grant, these are people, both the professionals who work in the grant offices and all the people on the panels. They work really hard in the arts to make the arts happen, and they want to be issuing these grants to you. So again, as I said, the panelists are not your adversaries, they're your friends. Same with the arts administrators. So ask them for help. If you're unsure about anything in the application process, or if you get a grant in the grant period, ask your arts administrators. I get so much help, and I've now been doing this for a bunch of years, and I still have all these questions every year for the administrators of both of our grants. You want to get it right. You want everything to go smoothly. They do too. Don't include anything that falls outside the scope of what the grant is interested in. This is something that I'll give you, again, from my experience. One of our grants is from the county of Sarasota. It's paid for by a tiny slice of taxes on hotels, so tourists mostly. It's called a Tourist Development Cultural/Arts Grant, and its intent is to increase tourism in the future. So that's what they're interested in. Oh, we like to support the arts so that there will bring more tourists, so that we'll make more money. So they're interested in things that we do that are completely outward-facing for tourists, like concerts. They don't want to know from education. Nothing. Now, if you remember, my organization is called New Music, New College. That college thing implies education, and of course it's central to our mission. Both our internal stuff and our outreach. We do outreach to other colleges and to high schools. I can't write any of that in a grant. It's a cool part of what we do. It's key. It's large. I ignore it all because this grant doesn't want to know. Conversely, the state of Florida grant that I write for loves education and outreach. They ask you about it. What kind of education and outreach are you doing? So I write about it then. Just remember to read these things. Talk to your grant administrators. Answer the questions that they ask you. But don't let the tail wag the dog. If there's a grant and you're like, it's money, and you've got the dollar signs in your eyes, and it's for someone who wants to fund kazoo orchestra music, and you don't do kazoo orchestras, don't start changing your season to do the first kazoo symphony because of this, unless it fits in with your mission and you want to. Attend all sessions or webinars on how to do the grant and how to administer the grant. They will be helpful. Some may be a little long-winded. Go to them anyway. Other people will ask questions that you might find interesting. You get to ask questions. And also, and this is true with at least one of my grants, part of what you get graded on in an application is how competent you administer your grant. And one of the questions is, did they attend all the sessions last year? So attend all the sessions. Respond to any questions from the grant administrators quickly. Don't let them get lost in your email. They're there to help you. Also from the panel, one of our grants, the process is after we submit it, panelists read it, and then in a certain period of time, they submit written questions back to us, and we get to respond. Now, don't get defensive if they ask you something that you think you've already covered. If you think you've already covered it, either they didn't read it carefully, or more likely, you didn't explain it as well as you think you explained it, and it doesn't matter. The good thing is they asked you something. So this is a chance actually to expand on what you wrote. This is the only time when you can say, okay, I want to keep it short, I want to keep it pithy. You can say, here is this interesting, you asked me the thing, I want to tell you about that. Most of you probably, I hope, already are. If you're not become aware of accessibility, diversity, and equity and inclusion. Grants have been really focused on accessibility for a long time, and now finally, grants are already finally getting interested in accessibility, in diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is something you, I hope, are already thinking about. Just be aware your grants are going to ask you questions about that. If you're have a successful grant application and you're doing it again, excuse me, just be aware, be careful when cutting and pasting from last year's application. I have one grant admin who always says, don't cut and paste. I always cut and paste. I mean, if I have a successful application, I don't reinvent the wheel. I look back to the parts that I think I did well, and I start with those. On the other hand, if you cut and paste, make sure you get your years right. Don't write a grant for last year's season again. Don't write a grant for last year's pieces or artists or, so just be smart about that. There will almost certainly be a final report that you'll have to submit once your grant is finished. And understand beforehand, most grants will expect you to collect data, I mentioned this before, to show you've achieved your goals. It might seem odd, because your goals might be to present some cool performances or commission a new piece or something like that. And you think, we did it. Here we have great performances. It's a new piece. It wasn't there before. Isn't that great? We did it. But the grant organizations have to get their money that they're giving you from someplace. And they're under pressure to show that they're using their funds effectively. And that means they collect data, and they want it to collect data from you. This will all be in the application, and this is not going to surprise you out of nowhere, but just be aware of it and be aware before the project begins, so that if you need to do surveys or if you need to collect data from where people come from, you're doing it as the project happens. Don't wait until the final report to say, oh, right, I needed to collect data. Gee, how do I do that now that's over? Don't do that. You'll be happier if you collect the data as you go. And similarly, keep detailed records of all the money you raise, all the money you spend, and that will may be needed for the final report. So go out, look for those grants, support the great things you want to do. I will be around today. I was hoping to be around tomorrow, but there's a tropical storm going to hit where I live, so I may have to cut out tomorrow instead of Sunday. But my email is rsilver@ncf.edu. rsilver@newccollegeflorida.edu as an education. Please feel free to ask me questions. I work better over the phone or in person, but we can start with email, and I'm happy to try to help you get some more grants. So thanks. So the question, to repeat it for those wonderful folks at home, is why is it more frustrating to apply for national grants than local and state grants? Yeah, I've gotten turned down for NEA grants a couple times, and I stopped applying because it was a very burdensome application. I had a great grant admin. I thought she was fabulous, but I got very little good feedback. This is another thing. I forgot to mention this in the tips. Sometimes you will get feedback from panelists at the end of the process. Whether it's good feedback or bad feedback, I always ask for it, I always write it down, and I put it in my folder for next year's grant, so I read it as I go. For the NEA, at least back when I was doing it, we had a phone call with our grant admin, and she read the feedback. So I was like, can I get this, could you send me no, we can't send you a doc, we can't send you anything. So I'm frantically scribbling as I'm on the phone trying to make these notes. And a lot of the feedback was, the project was really good. The outreach was very, very good. So I'm like, okay, so all the feedback you're telling me sounded really positive. why didn't we get a grant? And she said, oh, well, you know, it was very good, not excellent. So I'm like, okay, so they're grading it on some sort of rubric. And this is true for the local grants. They grade on a rubric. They usually tell you what that is. They give you more feedback. Now, I haven't done it in several years. So I can't speak to it now. But those were my experiences, and it's why, and it's a lot of work. Writing and administering grants is a lot of work. If you've never done it before, don't try 5 at once. Start with 1. Yes? So the question is, should the language be more kind of personal, like I'm talking to an individual, or more professional? I would probably err on the side of professional. And I can't say that that's I've ever really had to think about that much, because I'm, you know, I don't talk in real high language about what we do. So I mean, you know, talk as though you're talking to someone who doesn't know anything about it. So you know, don't use like lots of jargon. For instance, okay, there's a story I hear every year from our county, where there was a dance company in Sarasota, and it was applying for money to bring in someone, and said, oh, this person had just performed at Jacob's Pillow, and really impressive, but there were like people in the panel didn't know what Jacob's Pillow was. So, you know, that's the kind of thing you should explain. You know, saying something like, this person is nationally, you know, renowned in this, you know, it's great to mention things that any person might know. Pulitzer Prize, MacArthur Genius Grant. You know, and, but other than that, I don't write it like I'm talking to you. I put G's on the end of my gerunds and things like that. Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting question. Is it advantageous or disadvantageous to ask for less than you would like to? Okay, I always ask for the maximum that I can ask for, unless, and this has never come up, I didn't think I could spend it. There have been times when, because circumstances changed, I really had to juggle what I could spend the money on. And you can also only spend grant money on certain things. Again, depends on the grant. Almost never on food, by the way. Less and less on transportation. So you got to fund those otherwise. But I can't imagine, well, so one of the grants that I write for, we ask for this amount. They score everybody. You get a percentage depending on how well you scored. Then they look at their pot of money, which comes from the previous amount of taxes that, in that case, the tourists brought in, and then they divvy it all up. So usually we get a little less than we ask, because we do well, but we're also this outlier in Sarasota County doing this crazy new music stuff. And then there are more and more organizations who apply every year, so there's a little less money. There was one year where we didn't score perfect, but we actually got more than we asked for, because they had a boon in tourist dollars that year. So I would ask for as much as, that's got to be all more than well.
The switch. Who put the switch on a dynamic mic? I hate that. Okay. Hold on. Okay, a couple quick announcements. Tina's network, what's it called? Skyroam. Don't go on Skyroam. That's Tina's network. Get off Skyroam. If you need Wi-Fi for stuff, come ask me because I have access within if you're inside the landmark center itself. But otherwise, data. Go data or go home. There's 4 devices connected. You're destroying our stream. It's your fault. Don't cross the stream. Other announcement is for Landmark Center folks, accessibility. We actually have to move the chairs from the street to, I guess, back. Does it all have to be off? Could it be? Well, I guess it all has to be off the street, which I think sucks, but that's cool. So if everyone, I'm so sorry. If you could shmush, try and find the shade. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. I thought we could do it. We can't do it. Tina, is everyone off Skyroam? Just checking. Better be off Skyroam. Yeah. I once threw a calculator out a window. That kid never had a calculator again. Yeah, we're good? We're good. Yeah? No, it's still on 10th floor. Okay. Okay, we are all good to go. Are you? You can stand anywhere you want. Tina, can you see if Stephanie's there? No. What if we, because I want her to be in shade. What if I move this and then she stands where the speaker is? Okay, watch this. If you take the mic.
Okay. Well, I need to look at the.
Yeah, can you turn your
Yep.
laptop so you're.
Do you want a clicker?
No, I
Or you
think
can look at me and I can touch you.
I think if we move the table just a little bit
Sure.
forward,
you
I
wanna
think I'll be
sit?
fine.
Oh, sure.
Oh no, I just want to like be here and
Yeah, anything you need.
anything. No.
Anything, baby. Oh, wait. How's that? Yeah, I think it's still free. I can
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, you said it's kind of small.
That's fun. Okay. Great. So. Here, okay, we have everything, and
And I'll go put up laptop.
you put a what?
I'll put up the laptop.
Okay. Great. And yeah. Okay.
I'll give you a 10 and a 5.
Perfect. Okay, and I have my. Yeah. Okay, I guess maybe we need to wait for the siren for a moment. I guess that yellow and white wasn't the right color choice potentially for this. So I'll make sure and read everything aloud for you. So hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Ann Boyd. I am thank you, a classical music composer. I call myself a melodist because melody is my top priority, and I tend to write music about women's memoirs and the natural world. But today, I'm going to talk to you about using the consortium commission model as the way to make music and bring some loveliness to people's lives. So it all started in a violin lesson. So when I was like 16, I had the great privilege to start studying violin with John Kendall, who was the gentleman who brought the Suzuki method to America in the 60s. I think he went to Oberlin in like the 30s. And so I was working with him when he was 90 years old, but just amazing guy. I mean, everything he said, I wrote in big letters on pieces of paper and stuck them on my bedroom wall. And he was sort of like Yoda, okay? And one day he brings me into his study, and he shows me 2 maps on the wall, a map of the world and a map of the US, and he hands me a box of tacks, and he says, "Stephanie, call out a region." And so I do. And off the top of his 90-year-old head, he names off the names of every single student he's ever had in those regions. And I'm putting push pins in, and my fingers are getting sore because like it's hard, and he has so many names. And I'm realizing, okay, this guy was so magical to me, and yet I'm seeing how much magic he's created for all of these other people. He called himself a peripatetic pedagogue, which I love. But so yeah, I mean, to have that much meaning in his life was quite inspiring. And so that sort of planted the seeds for doing things a little differently later in my life. And then, of course, we always have to go back to childhood, right? You can't really see it, but back in the day when I was young, my daddy told me, Stephanie, the meaning of life is to provide value for other people. And, of course, what my businessy dad meant is try to make people's lives better, Stephanie. That's, God wants you to do that. So I have that. And then we have our Picasso quote, everything you can imagine is real. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep reminding ourselves as we try to do things differently than our predecessors, our classical music predecessors. As my father also says, the cutting edge is the bleeding edge, because when you're doing things differently, it's like, trying to hack through the jungle. Like, there's no path there, so it's going to be a little painful, but also you're going to get to some really cool places. So inspired by Mr. Kendall and all of his worldwide influence, after grad school, I really wanted to write a violin sonata, and I didn't want to wait for grants. And also I was 24, and I didn't think that I would get a grant, so I'll talk about that later. So I said, well, you know what? What if I find people from every state in the US who wants a new violin sonata? Maybe I can write a violin sonata and have it commissioned by all of these people. And so I did that. So that was the 50-state sonata project. It was commissioned by violinists in nearly all 50 states. I think we didn't get like New Jersey, something like that, in Mississippi. Yeah, I know. And it was pretty great. These were concert masters of state orchestras, heads of violin at state universities, and kids at music schools, and even my little cousin, who's now the wonderful violinist I told you about yesterday, in Iowa. So the next year, I did the same thing for solo violin sonata, and this was commissioned by violinists in 35 countries. The work contains 7 movements, 1 for each continent, and yeah. So the sort of the more, I guess, the fun fact about this is that it got a 10 concert tour of ancient Faroe Islands churches by the concertmaster of the Faroe Islands Symphony. Most of our conversations, besides the music, we did talk about sheep and fish. It was really cool to hear him talk about the Faroe Islands. Yeah, it got performed at a citywide music festival in the Netherlands, at a cross-genre music series in Dublin, and it actually got another performance here last November. Yeah, and then concerts in a bunch of other places. And it's really beautiful to be able to connect with people through music. I mean, there's so many professions out there, but music, I mean, I know, yeah, music is the universal language. Yes, we've all heard that so many times, but also it is so cool when you can be talking to people and both have such a similar vocabulary of things that you love so deeply, and I'll talk about that a little later. But moving on, so you heard a little bit of my most recent consortium commission here. This was Flower Catalog, a set of 12 preludes for piano, and this one was, yay, Marion Parker. This one went a little differently. So each of the Flower Catalog preludes were commissioned by a different piano soloist about her own favorite flower. The entire collection can live and breathe as a full concert set, but each prelude can also be utilized as a uniquely personal encore. So actually what the sort of secret program notes from Marianne's piece is that she chose the pincushion protea for her wedding bouquet. So yeah, and what's really fascinating is if you ask somebody about their favorite flower, pretty soon you get to these really, really intense family stories, because when you think about the association, like why you would choose a favorite flower, you're going to have associations probably about maybe your mother or your grandmother. And I will tell you, there were so many tears, happy tears, nostalgic tears, bittersweet tears, when I was working with these artists to get the stories and to write the stories. So Flower Catalog was commissioned by Lise de la Salle, the French pianist, Marion Parker, who you know, Diane Katzenberg-Braun, Unbi Kim, who I met at New Music Gathering last time, Holly Roadfelt, who you all probably know from Twitter as well, and Adrian Park, Susie Maddox, Sarah Bobb, who you also would have seen at New Music Gathering, Marta Aznavourian, Jenny Lin, and Lucille Chung. And now that, well, we'll get back to this. So why do a consortium commission? Why open up a piece to so many parents and have a lot more people in the process? Because there's costs and benefits. So when I started the 50 State Sonata project, like I told you, I was 24. And I had decided to leave academia. I didn't want to go on and do my doctorate because I wanted to get to writing music and having those interactions and having those concerts and working with people right away. I'm sort of an impatient person sometimes. And grants, I mean, I applied to a few different things for the 50 State Sonata project. Send in so many Jerome Foundation grants. For all the things like this, and you know, don't get that. So another reason why I went ahead and decided to try and design something different was because I still needed to pay my rent, right? And I don't want to wait. Ron, I didn't have the time to wait a whole year to do that. And also just the math checks out. Like if you can, I mean, at 24, $5,000 for a 13, 12-minute violin sonata, like that's pretty good for somebody right out of school. And that split 50 ways is way more feasible than $5,000 split one way for one person. And I also was trying to think of a way to make it a really easy yes for people, so that it would be like, well, you're going to already buy the sheet music to this other piece for $50. So what about this other, you know, again, trying to actually think about it economically to make it feasible for everybody. Moving on. It's really great when you are able to have so many loving, caring eyes trying to make a piece better, or just editing, making sure that the, you know, pizzicato is there, or adding to things. That's a lot of brains on working to make one piece successful, and also by the time you have 3 violinists point something out that you've done wrong. You fix that one right away, and it's so lovely. Sebastian Selen, the violinist from Finland for the World Sonata project, he found this really cool harmonic thing, and so I added it to the rest of the piece. And it makes me sad when I think about what would have happened if Sebastian wasn't part of the project. And we have that thing about new music versus music that's been played and recorded a bajillion times. It's so great for violinists to say, look at this recording of the Franck Sonata. Oh, but this guy's doing a different bowing, and look at, you know, all these different, like there's so much more data. And so, yes, our timeline is a lot more scrunched, but when you're doing a big consortium project like this and people can talk with each other, then you also have like all of that data and exploration from different people with their different practices, like that's all happening in real time. Like, yes, the piece doesn't have 100 years of preparation and inspiration to go on, but yeah, it's another benefit. And also, it's not just because I didn't have any friends in middle school. But that's when I spent all that time composing anyways. But it is really great to have friends and colleagues all over the world, and we learn so much from each other. And again, especially out of school, when you're a composer, and so a lot of your time is spent alone, it is really nice to be working with many different people, and certainly a huge growth component there for everybody. And also you get an excuse to work with people you admire. So this was my excuse to work with Marianne for the first time. And I, especially when you're doing something not, I guess when you're doing something that's involving people from different cultures, you get a lot of what I call added in translation. Not lost in translation, added in translation. And my example for that was in the World Sonata Project, working with Mariana Gutierrez from Guatemala. I was asking her what her favorite music is, or what some of her favorite pieces were to play, and she said, "Oh, Stephanie, Vivaldi Winter from Four Seasons, because it always makes me think of beautiful rainstorms." I was like, "Rainstorms?" I thought it was supposed to be like, I think of snow, and of course, no, she's from Guatemala. That's like the coldness to her, right? So. Yeah. And also, the impact of doing things a little differently. I didn't want to move to New York City and be a composer who just had New York City performances. I thought that was incredibly selfish and not exciting, and not my focus. And so being able to. Well, and also being able to go to Hawaii on a business trip, like that was pretty cool. Didn't have to get married to do that. And also, like I said before, so many different professions where this sort of immediate collaboration wouldn't quite be as possible. And so I like to say that there's never been a better time to do what we do, and I think that that's true here. And of course, it's also started to inspire other projects, like Alexis Nachtigal, the Nebraska violinist from the 50 State Sonata Project, created the Nebraska Sonata Project. So she raised money to commission other pieces from Nebraska composers and did a tour with that concert. And Catherine Rinderknecht Moritz, who probably many of you know from Twitter, she created Shared Stories Iowa and decided to commission music from a bunch of people, including Alan Tyson and myself and a few other people you definitely know. And she's playing those in every county in Iowa in many different places. So now, yes, there's many costs, so we've gone over the benefits. Costs include, it's a lot of time talking to people. It's a lot of time, and you will get to know your program notes very well, because when you're talking about them, explaining them to musicians themselves, you're going to repeat yourself a lot. But that also means that when you're giving your program notes before concerts, it's totally fine because you've already done that like 20 times or more. And of course, making sure that everybody feels heard can be, it's important. But again, it's just another thing to add to your skill set. And then sometimes you get inspired to do things. So for example, for Flower Catalog, the piano preludes, we didn't have the problem of, I guess, the taking so many individual thoughts into one piece, because I was only communicating with Marianne about her piece. So we had that. But got inspired to make a lookbook talking about everybody and their intense stories behind the piece. And so this is what I spent like all September doing. So So sometimes the costs are hidden because I'm not a graphic designer, but I was inspired. And so I'll just show you some things here. So yeah, and we'll just take a quick peek at, oh, okay, sorry. This is a quote from my mother. She said, "I wanted our yard to be an edible yard," because when I was asking all of these artists for their own stories about this plant, I said, well, why am I so crazy about nature? So I had a long discussion with my mother and learned some of the subconscious reasons for all of that. So I'll just show you a little bit the pages for Marianne's chapter in the lookbook, as it were. So that is the pincushion protea. Looks sort of alien, right? And I love this quote from her. This is from our interviews before I wrote the piece. Whoops. She said, "I hear the explosion of the color and the brightness, the juxtaposition of angles and pointiness with the lushness." So there we go. And I'm going to play you just a little thing right after that, right after this. But so looking forward, I mean, the obvious thing is to do the same sorts of things for all the instruments. So that's what I'll be doing for the next many years of my life. I'm currently working on the World Sonata projects for cello, guitar, flute, and violin again. I mean, I'm a former violinist, so I really like that, but you couldn't tell. And so send me a message if you want to be like Mr. Oklahoma, so that I can know that even if it's, even if you don't play one of these instruments, the other ones, they're in process. So I'm going to play you. It's actually the trailer for my spring season, but it has a lot of small clips of many of these pieces that I've talked to you about. Even the clip of a ballet that was made for Lilac, one of the other Flower Catalog pieces. And the beginning of the music is Holly Roadfeld playing her commission Daffodil from Flower Catalog. And the end music is Adrienne Park playing Lily of the Valley, her commission from Flower Catalog. So let me get to the beginning here. And sorry, there's some footage of me like laughing just because I thought it was funny, and it was the pandemic and I needed some levity. So let's see here. Oh, okay, that's too loud. well, I just had it off. Yeah. So the question was, how did I find these people? Did I cold call them? What did I do? So for the 50 State Sonata project, well, I love being sort of like a nosy internet detective, and so yeah, I did basically look on the internet and try and find the people that I thought I would like vibe well with, and also people that I wanted to work with, and yeah, told them about the project. I wrote them an email telling them this is what I want to do. Here's my other violin music I've already written, and yeah, almost everybody said yes. I mean, it's still like terrifying to write people out of the blue for any reason, and so, but yeah, and now more often it's people like saying like, by the way, next time you do this, like sign me up. So yeah, so yep. Next question. Yes, Marianne. Wait, sorry, Marianne. I didn't hear. So Marianne was talking about my time with. I mean, time between difference between composing and. Oh, yeah. So Marianne was. I think Marianne's asking if my work on the consortium stuff and other cool stuff for the website is like different than, or how I divide my time between consortium. Oh, like the lookbook versus like this thing. Yeah. I I don't know. I mean, I guess whatever is sort of like needs to happen in the moment is what I'm spending my time on. But I will say that like 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 flower catalog, like wanting to do that lookbook, like that was super inspiring to me. And also I knew that like all of your stories, that was going to be a really great source of like of information and beauty. And so I was certainly going to take a lot of time to make that happen. Whereas other projects and concerts maybe aren't as fertile for like spending a whole month doing something for that. But I am trying to, I mean, like I did that little movie trailer on like iMovie, and I didn't know how to do iMovie before that. But now that I spent the 20 hours putting that together, now the next time it won't be so much time spent on it. So yeah, a lot of time investment initially, but things get easier and easier, I think. Yes, Lainey? Yeah, so Lainey said, are people excited to be in a consortium? And I think for the most part, the feedback is usually yes. Because, I mean, there's, of course, you want to commission a concerto all by yourself. And actually, all the concertos I've written are with that, just one person commissioning it. But I think also everybody realizes that you're not going to immediately have like the however many thousands of dollars it's going to take to pay for somebody to work on your behalf solely for a few months. And also, again, I think a lot of people are thinking practically, and so you're going to be able to build off of the work that these other people are putting into it. And also, I think there are a lot of people who are really excited to work with the other people they know from their field. And I think at the end of the day, most of us are pretty collaborative, like of a pretty collaborative nature. And despite the conservatory, like dog-eat-dog thing that a lot of us have experienced, I think when we get out into the real world, or at least, I don't know, and maybe it's the people that I'm choosing to work with, but for the most part, it's pretty exciting, pretty good. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Dynamic microphones don't have to turn off. They do not have to turn off. No, not you, not you, not you. I'm saying the makers. Steph is perfect. I just hate that they turn on. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, we're going to do new friends. We're going to do a new format of new friends. That's a teaser. But we're going to take maybe like a 5-10 minute break, stretch out, talk to the amazing presenters. Adam's right there. Ron's right there. Steph is right here. Come and ask them. Back for new. If you're watching, I'll go to GatherTown. If you didn't register, you don't have the password for GatherTown. That sucks for you. Go register on the website. It's right there. It's the passes. Go to passes. It's a free Google form, and within 5-10 minutes, we'll email you the password for GatherTown. Go make new friends. Danny's in there. Say hi to Danny. Everyone, hi, Danny. Hi, Danny. Okay. Thank you. 5-10 minutes.